There's this giant storm of Twitter drama that results in Bitcoin SV being delisted, which does impact my company negatively for reasons that had nothing to do with anything that we're doing.
And good day, everyone. Today I'm joined by the one and only Ryan X. Charles, formerly of High Yours fame, but now focusing a whole lot on the money button. How's it going, Ryan?
Very good. Thanks for having me, Joel. Good to talk to you.
Yeah, no problem. I just want to talk about delist SV because it appears from where I've been looking that Craig Wright in particular has engaged in some kind of activity specifically related to lawsuits, and a number of major exchanges have not taken kindly to this and have responded by delisting Bitcoin SV entirely. And there seems to be a movement started on by various Twitter posts asking to delist SV. And I just, as someone who's involved in the SV ecosystem, but isn't Calvin Wright or Calvin Ayre, Craig Wright, you know, good little portmanteau both right there, I thought I'd get your perspective on this whole thing. First off, what do you think of the whole delist SV movement? What's your hot take on it?
Well, my take is actually, it's just really funny because last weekend I made a video called Why I Left Twitter. And the reasons for leaving Twitter were basically that Twitter has so much misinformation that I simply can't even read it. It's literally not even worth my time to read Twitter because I can get all the same information that's actually true from other platforms. Whereas on Twitter, I get the true stuff and a whole bunch of false stuff. And so there's no way to rely on anything that I read on Twitter. I have to validate things off Twitter anyway. So it's really funny that literally right after I made that video, there's this giant storm of Twitter drama that results in Bitcoin SV being delisted, which does impact my company negatively for reasons that had nothing to do with anything that we're doing. So in the greater crypto sphere, it's very common for people to think that Bitcoin SV is only Craig and Calvin, which is not correct. When companies like Kraken delist BSV, they're delisting the currency that's being used by my company and many other smaller companies and projects that are not necessarily directly related to InChain and CoinGeek. We have no formal relationship with CoinGeek, but it is true that InChain is one of our investors. They're not the biggest investor, but they are one of them.
They're not a founder of the company, though, right? Like, I think I remember you guys operating before I even heard of InChain or CoinGeek. Yes,
we started the company. Our company was founded in 2016. It's originally a project going back to 2015. InChain, I think, existed at the time, but no one had heard of them because they were completely private. So. Yeah, no one at InChain was involved in founding this company. It was founded by myself and Clemens Lay in 2016.
And they're not your biggest investor, are they?
No, InChain is not our biggest investor. They are the second biggest investor. The biggest investor is Bitmain.
Oh, and everyone knows they're run by Craig Wright and Calvin Ayre, right?
Definitely not. Definitely not.
Yes. So what do you think briefly of the ethics of this kind of decision? Do you think it's an ethical decision for a cryptocurrency exchange, specifically cryptocurrency, to decide to act against one actor in the ecosystem and delist a cryptocurrency that is heavily associated with that person? Do you think that's an ethical decision that they're making? And if briefly, very briefly, because that's an hour-long response you could give to that question. Very quickly, just a couple minutes. What do you think it's ethical?
Very quickly, no, it is not ethical. They have delisted. So looking at, Binance, I think was the first one. Binance just doesn't like, the guy CZ just doesn't like Craig and Calvin, and just all these people like to generate drama on Twitter and just make decisions based on drama. So there's nothing ethical about it. It was just a way of getting attention. It's a way of making a stand. And it makes the cryptocurrency industry look very childish because normal exchanges like NASDAQ or something like that would never make such a insane, childish decision like this based on pure drama. It's probably illegal. I mean, if NASDAQ were to delist someone, they just say, I don't like that guy, I'm going to delist you. Well, that's not a reason to delist the coin. there's, at a technical, economic, and legal perspective, Bitcoin SV checks all the boxes of being a completely stable and legitimate cryptocurrency in that sense. So there's no reason to delist it. They delisted it for political gain. Same thing with Kraken. It was actually funnier with Kraken because Kraken ran a Twitter poll and had people vote on Twitter. Now, the people who voted in Kraken's poll are not the same thing as Kraken's users. Kraken didn't have Kraken's users vote in a poll. They had Twitter users vote in a poll. And Twitter users, there's a lot of misinformation and manipulation going on Twitter. So I have no idea how much of that was real. But think about how silly that is, that you would have a Twitter poll and then literally make a critical company decision based on the results of Twitter. Yeah, so in summary,
not user accounts, not Kraken user accounts.
No, it wasn't user accounts. It wasn't anything like that. So the short answer is no, it's not ethical. It's childish.
Yeah, and to add to the Twitter bit, I recently reached out to some kind of a company via a backup Twitter account because they didn't have I couldn't reach them any other way. They didn't have a direct message availability, and I did not want to, as my personal self, reveal myself to be a client of this company, right? So I, sock puppet, just a backup account I haven't touched in years, sock puppet, not because I run around manipulating polls, but because I don't, but I imagine a bunch do. Now, but here's where the criticisms come a little bit more, here's where it kind of hones in. I've asked a few people about this, and they said they do not view Bitcoin SV to be a legitimate project, in that they view it to be the project of Craig Wright and Calvin Ayre and associated companies. And they do not think on the ethics side of things, they do not think it's ethical to do business with such an organization. So do you think that there's any fairness or accuracy in saying Bitcoin SV is controlled by Wright and Ayre, or heavily associated, or that it is interchangeable to kind of lump them together as the same entity?
Well, no. I mean, there's a bunch of things going on in those statements that you just made. I mean, first of all, I would disagree with people that Calvin and Craig are doing anything unethical. I mean, the people who are saying that they're doing something unethical, Craig is suing people for libel, and he's suing people that actually libeled him. He's suing people that actually made up stuff about him that's untrue and told everyone and got people to believe them. That's libel. He's suing them for that. That's not, that he should sue people for libel if they've actually libeled him, and that's what's going on. So first of all, at a purely ethical perspective, there's nothing unethical about that. There are a lot of people that don't like Craig for other reasons, but none of it has anything to do with crime or something like that. People don't like Craig's attitude, and that's fine if that's your opinion, and you can associate with whoever you want to associate with. So if these people don't want to engage with Craig because they don't like Craig, that's fine. That's their opinion. But ethics has nothing to do with it. Craig and Calvin haven't done anything unethical. So that's just incorrect. Now, when the other part of it is just a fact of the matter about who controls Bitcoin SV and that type of thing. Now, it is true, actually, if you add up the mining power controlled by in-chain, Bitmain, and in-chain and CoinGeek, not Bitmain, in-chain and CoinGeek, and also Craig Wright's personal mining pool, they control more than 50% of the hash power. So that much is true. That's a true statement. Those entities combined control more than 50%. So they do sort of have a collective control in that sense. They don't have 100% of the mining power, but they do have, together, they have more than 50%.
How much more than 50% last time you checked, roughly?
I would estimate, I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 66%, if I remember the charts correctly.
So about 2/3 of the network.
I think approximately, yes.
If one were to broadly categorize who owns SV, which it's always a dicey thing when you're talking about a decentralized network. I mean, a network that is built on completely decentralized architecture, that in theory is, at the very least. You could say it is at least 1/3 if you're trying to use SV to hurt certain people, to attack SV to hurt certain people and companies. That's 2/3 of what you're doing, and 1/3 is other people completely.
So can you phrase that again? I'm not sure I understand what is the question.
So Do you think it would then would you think it would be fair to say then that at least 1/3 of SV has nothing to do with companies or people associated with Wright
Yeah,
Energy?
yeah. I would say it. I would put it several different ways. I mean, it's not like mining power is not the only metric here. I mean, measured by who owns all of it. Well, that certainly isn't Craig or Calvin either. I mean, Bitcoin SV, is one of the original Bitcoin derivatives. So Bitcoin SV, the mission of Bitcoin SV is just to be the closest thing we have to the original Bitcoin protocol on launch day. Okay. So the people that own it are all sorts of different people. I mean, it's not mostly Craig and Calvin. So the who owns the coin is a completely different set of people than who owns more than 50% of the mining power, which is also a completely different set of people than who is creating all of these applications on Bitcoin SV. And most of these people have nothing to do with InChain or CoinGeek. They're just lots of independent people creating applications. So I think it is fair to say, first and foremost, something that's not controversial is it is not entirely owned by Craig and Calvin. It is owned, it depends on what you mean by that, but there are many, many people involved that have nothing to do with Craig and Calvin. And but at the same time, I mean, I do acknowledge that InChain and CoinGeek and the affiliated companies have more than 50%. So I think of mining power specifically, not of the coin. So that's the only way I can answer that question, is just the fact of the matter is they don't have total control, but they are also the most influential parties in the in this sort of economy.
Now, by that same token, would you say, I mean, obviously it's a matter of personal opinion, but what would you say is the percentage influence Bitcoin.com and Roger Ver and associated folks have with Bitcoin Cash? That's probably not 66%, but it's probably higher. It's probably higher than like 10.
That's a good question. I mean, that's tough to say. I mean, I can only say things that are controversial. I'll say it as sort of politely as I can. I mean, look, first of all, I like Bitmain and I like many of these people as people, and it's fine that they want to do all the things that they want to do. I think Amari personally has more control over that blockchain than anyone else. I mean, Amari by himself probably, if you had to put numbers on it, has greater than 50%, because the technical direction is mostly being driven by Amari, as best I can tell. So there's sort of a different group of people there, because in Bitcoin Cash they want to change the protocol. So there's a different cast of characters, because it's who decides how they change the protocol. Well, changing the protocol isn't something that we do whatsoever in Bitcoin SV. This is simply the original protocol. There are no people out there that are like influential protocol designers. No one like that exists in Bitcoin SV. So it's a completely different, like, what even are the nature of the people that have power in Bitcoin Cash is a very different set of people. There's no developer in Bitcoin SV who has a lot of say, because that's not how, no one changes the protocol. It would no longer be Bitcoin SV if you made random changes to the protocol. The only changes we're making are to restore the original protocol. So do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
Like, Bitcoin Cash also has miners and businesses and applications, but they also have developers who make changes to the protocol. And so those people have a lot of power, and that's mostly Amari. And so, yeah, then you look at who's mining it. I have not looked at that chart recently, so I don't want to say what that is based on memory. It's a bit out of date, but it's just a different set. It's like Bitcoin.com and Bitmain and other affiliated companies, but I don't know what the portions are when it comes to mining.
Yeah, so now we go to the next part, which is the whole so what. A lot of people say, well, you're just complaining, you don't like, because it happened to be something that hurts you, but these are private companies. They can list whatever asset they want. They can do whatever, they can serve whatever they want. And if this is something the free market truly desires, someone else will just make an exchange that will support SV, even support SV exclusively if they want to, and everything will just turn out okay. So why are you even complaining that private businesses are making private business decisions that the market will soon reward or punish them for? Well, what is your take on that sort of argument?
Yeah. So I mean, my stance is basically, first of all, I haven't actually complained about it. I mean, I find it irritating because, of course, I find it irritating. But I do believe that Kraken has the right to list whoever they want to list. And if they want to make a decision based on a Twitter poll, well, that's their call. My stance is that it is most likely the case that if Kraken wants to continue to grow as an exchange, they need to make adult-based decisions and not child-based decisions like that. But that's their call. If they want to act like that and make decisions based on a Twitter poll, they can do whatever they want to do. Same thing with Binance, but there's actually a difference with Binance. Binance is most likely actually operating illegally because although they moved to Malta, that doesn't really matter if you continue to have users in the United States and users all over the world in different places like Japan and Hong Kong, where Binance also wasn't able to operate there because it's illegal there and it's illegal in the US. So Binance is doing all the wrong things if they actually want to continue to grow as a business. You can't operate illegally in your biggest markets and think that it's going to keep working. I mean, eventually they're either going to have to change and correct themselves and comply with the regulations, or they just won't be able to operate in the US, or in a worst case scenario, they could even go to prison because what they're doing is just illegal. So Binance is a different story because they're not trying to comply with the law. Kraken is a completely legitimate legal business. Binance is not. I mean, they're legitimate in Malta, but they're not legit in the US, and they're not legit in Japan, and they're not legit in Hong Kong. So that's the difference with them. I mean, so they can do that, but they can do whatever they want to. They want to delist currencies or list currencies for whatever reasons they want to. That's fine. But they're going to have a completely different set of issues, which is they're clearly not in compliance with any of the laws in some of the biggest markets. And that's a totally different issue that they're going to have to grapple with.
Yeah, now, of course, everyone can operate as they see fit in order to maximize the profit growth of their business, whatever. Now, there have been a couple of exchanges that have delisted Bitcoin SV, and I believe one who delisted Bitcoin Cash. Some of these have cited things like for example, total hash power, or for example, not enough trading volume that they don't like. Reasons like that, which whether or not it's true, whether it's just a completely just a made up excuse where they really just wanted to follow the herd, at least that's like a legitimate business reason that they're citing, whether or not that's actually true. Now, but what do you think about the exchanges that don't even make an effort to justify? They just say, this is because, Aussie man bad. This is because we don't like that guy, don't like what he's doing. What do you think of the precedent that sets of making business decisions based on completely, I would say, not entirely business relevant criteria?
Well, I mean, so first of all, you're right that the way to make a decision like this is the set of criteria you just listed. Is it secure? Does it function? Does it do what it's supposed to do? When our users deposit money, are they going to be able to withdraw that money in the future because it's going to continue to work technically? Those are important questions to ask. So those are the right type of criteria. Now, the exchanges that have delisted it for those criteria are simply wrong. I mean, there's nothing less secure about this than the other cryptocurrencies. It is better than many of the other ones. I would give much bigger problems with some of the other ones. But in any case, that's the right set of criteria. So whether they agree or disagree or whatever is a different question. At least they're asking the right questions. The other ones that, like Kraken, until now, I had nothing against Kraken. But to me, this is like a insanely childish decision for Kraken to literally create a Twitter poll and make a decision on the basis of the results of a Twitter poll. It's embarrassing for the industry. It makes all of us look like children, that this is the way that the major businesses in the industry make decisions, is based on Twitter. I mean, when we go out there and try and talk with real companies and stuff like this comes up, we all look bad. So I would just say, I don't think Kraken, at least as far as I understand, I'm not aware of any illegal actions from Kraken. I just think it's childish. I think it's embarrassing. And I hope that they can start acting more mature, because they make the rest of us look bad when they make decisions based on a Twitter poll.
Yes, absolutely. Well, that seems to be the whole perspective. I'll see if I can get some more from other members of the community, and of course detractors. You have to have both. But thanks a lot for your time.
Sure, great to talk with you, Joel.
Yeah, great. Have a good one. And now I have the distinct pleasure of speaking to, once again, Kurt Wuckert Jr., Bitcoin
Yes,
SV fan extraordinaire and partner in Crypto Traders Pro. How's it going, Kurt?
I'm doing all right, Joel. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty well. I'm enjoying diving a little deeper into this whole delist SV issue because at first it was like an oh snap, eat your popcorn because
Yep.
drama going down in the Twitterverse. So no, you didn't, all that kind of stuff. And then I started thinking about there's layers of this, like ethically to an onion, like an onion, as well as just what does it say about a bunch of things in the like it just questions. The more questions pop up. So, first off, what's your hot take on the issue?
It's petty. I think it's childish. I think everybody looks immature across the board. Everything from, look at crypto Twitter cartoon bot trolls and all of that. I mean, we all kind of knew that was a little immature with cartoon characters that have 50,000 followers on Twitter harassing people all day. But now, you get guys like CZ or Jesse Powell at Kraken or Eric Voorhees now at Shapeshift. And I just think it looks immature, it looks unprofessional, and it makes us all by proxy, regardless of your crypto community, I think it makes us all look not ready for prime time because it's like a schoolyard squabble that turned into weird business decisions.
Yeah. So before we go too much further, I just got to do the in-chain bot test. Make sure are you on the payroll of any owned company of say Craig Wright, Calvin Ayre, any of that?
No.
Do you have any associations?
I have never accepted any money from any Bitcoin related project or company or person at all. Actually, my whole cryptocurrency revenue comes from my own proof of work. I own a company in the space. CryptoTradersPro.com is a subscription service, and that's where my money comes from. So no, I don't have any financial anything from anyone in the SV community.
Now, of course, everyone's personal finances stuff are confidential. But that being said, would you consider SV to disproportionately impact your portfolio? Is there like and now I'm just talking about like a big number to where if SV went off the mat, just vanished, but a few of the other coins rose, would you be still ruined, or you'd be fine?
I'd be okay. I'm an old schooler and I'm very conservative. So like my home situation, all of that, like I live in a little house. I've been a Bitcoiner since 2012. I could be one of those Lambo guys or whatever. I don't care about that kind of thing. So regardless, I mean, my bills would get paid. If SV was like orphaned and gone, like I'd be fine.
Yeah. So you're not like a filthy bag holder who just doesn't like this because he's holding his bags.
No, absolutely not. I like I said, I trade full time. So for me, like market liquidity and market movements, like I don't care what moves or when. Like I'm looking to make money on the markets as a whole. And I also have other investments outside of crypto as well. Like I'm a very conservative person. I would never have a giant pile of Bitcoin SV be my entire nest egg. It was just, it's really irresponsible.
Yeah, I can imagine. So has this delist SV thing, has it impacted you personally?
Interesting. I mean, maybe from an emotional standpoint or the opportunity to communicate with people about what it means. I think it's interesting how many people thought that it would be the opportunity to point the finger and laugh or call me like, oh, you must be wrecked because you're some kind of a shill. So you're probably some bag holder. And, I first of all, I think that that's mean.
Well, it's supposed to be mean. That's kind of why they say it.
Yeah, but I just find it humorous how much people immediately turn to like the ha, and I'm just like, guys, this is just like, it makes everyone look petty. It makes everyone in every crypto community, all these people that are trying to look professional or go mainstream. Imagine trying to set up a business to accept Dash and have them look, well, let's see what's going on in the crypto sphere right now. Like, well, looks like a bunch of weirdos are fighting over whether or not cartoons can go to jail, and therefore exchange listings are up for grabs. Like it doesn't make any sense. So I think the only way it's affected me is it's given me opportunity to beg people to be to be less immature, I guess.
Interesting. Now, here's the big question is, in as far as I've been able to discern, the biggest argument / reasoning for this is Craig Wright specifically, but let's just say associates have specifically targeted individuals and with harassment, bullying, and more specifically legal action, attempting to cause, and which, by the way, in a cypherpunk sort of crypto anarchist type world, using the law for anything other than extreme measures is a huge no-no for the most part. Of course, it's a diverse array of consciousness, but not just that. So the idea is, because of all that drastic action against people who did nothing more than express opinions, then that kind of thing makes him a highly unethical actor in the space that people do not want to do business with. It would be unethical to do business with him. And so therefore they are delisting his coin, as SV is seen, because nChain and CoinGeek and Calvin Ayre and Craig Wright de facto own Bitcoin SV. They de facto run the thing, even though it's technically decentralized. That's the main argument. So there's two parts to that. First off is, who is SV? Is it just those couple people? Or is it more than that, and to what degree? And then the second thing is, what do you think of the action of like retaliating by delisting the coin as a way of standing, or rather not retaliating, of standing up to and refusing to do business with an actor who's done those kinds of things? So first off, who is SV? Is it just those two guys?
Well, no. So they're the biggest miners on the network, so they're not insignificant, obviously, but they're guys that have invested heavily in Bitcoin. They were invested in BTC and BCH and now BSV. Like, they clearly have a vision that's been consistent from day one to day today. But some of that stuff is political. Like, yes, Bitcoin SV is a smaller community and they're big fish in a smaller pond, but I can think of 100 people who I think are significant players in the Bitcoin SV universe, like people who have made it possible for people to use it for what it's used for. And that's everyone from Ryan Charles, who created Money Button, which is this fantastic tool that's being used in the space. And you can go to Handcash or CentB, which is Lorian Gamaroff from South Africa, is a very, very wealthy, powerful man himself. And he's an SV maximalist. You can look at people from someone like Unwriter, or the people that are in Unwriter's Slack group. Like, these are very significant players, and without them, I think about how much things would be affected if Money Button became a Dash project exclusively or something. Like, that would be a big kick in the shorts for Bitcoin SV. And Ryan Charles is certainly not Craig Wright or Calvin Ayre, but of course, there's,
speaking of that, of SV projects going Dash, supposedly Handcash was originally considering Dash as the platform to use before going to Bitcoin Cash.
I've heard that. I know Alex Agut is a fan of Dash, the branding, the kind of the cohesive marketing message of Dash, and actually I don't disagree either. But
yeah, so it seems like, so then there's a bunch of big players that have nothing to do with Craig Wright and nChain. Now, as far as like putting their fingers in every pie, for example, I do know that Handcash runs off of technology that's patented by nChain, and Yours Inc., including Money Button, has a significant number. Again, as I heard, one of the top 2 largest investors is in fact nChain. So I don't know. I have not looked into CentB or anything that Unwriter's doing, or these other kind of significant parts of the community. But do you think that, what do you think, where do you think the tentacles go there? Do you think they all have bits in all those companies too, or a lot of them?
Sure.
Or like,
I do
majority?
actually. It's the same thing. It's just like looking at, how much influence does Blockstream have over Bitcoin Core? And people argue, oh, they're, almost none, but their fingerprints are all over everything too. Or Digital Currency Group and their fingerprints over the Ethereum community or Ethereum Classic and that kind of thing. And so I don't think that that's actually indicative of anything that nChain and CoinGeek would have their tentacles in whatever. But it's the same thing too. If you look at some of these other groups like Coinbase, like how many things is Coinbase related to, or where Coinbase is the major funder, and you can go everywhere from ZRX, the Zero X project, or Paradex Exchange, all these different things. So yes, nChain and CoinGeek are significant players in most regards of the Bitcoin SV community, but that's the incentive structure of Bitcoin. They're the miners, they're the ones that are competing for blocks, and it's in their best interest to provide the most value out to the ecosystem. So they pick and choose projects that they like, or people that are good developers may reach out and say, hey, Calvin, hey, Craig, or hey, whoever, like, I have this really good idea. I'd like it to be exclusive to Bitcoin SV, and I'd like some development help. So, yeah, I think that, yes, they're involved to a degree in everything on the blockchain, but I don't think that that's indicative of anything unique or nefarious by any means.
Okay. Now, what about the actual action of, what do you think of the ethics of just not wanting to do business or be associated with someone who engages in, I guess, legal threats, legal action, etc., especially in response to free speech?
Yeah. I mean, don't do business with Craig.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty easy, like we're not forced to.
So you think it makes sense to not do business with the project that he puts his most time to because of that?
I think it's immature. I think it's lame. But if that's how people want to be, then sure. It's just like anything. It's these maximalist cults across the board everywhere. Like, I'm sure there are people in the SV community that'll be wondering why the hell I'm talking to someone from Dash, right? And
I met a couple.
It's stupid. Like, it's a dumb thing to be that tribal, or it's like how, Jews and Catholics can't be friends. It's like, come on, grow up. But the point is that, if you don't want to do business with Craig Wright, that's fine. Nobody says you have to. Now, when Craig reaches out, like, I understand the crypto anarchist argument, right? Like, hey, you're trying to sick the government onto people for something that hasn't actually caused you harm. First of all, I would argue that this kind of, Craig Wright is a fraud hashtag thing has actually done him harm, financially and otherwise. But, reputationally, Craig Wright has built an entire career in the cryptography space, in the IT space. If you agree that he was at least involved in, the very early development of Bitcoin, then, we're arguing that the industry that he very much helped create, he can't do business in because it's alleged that he's a fraud. And, that's unfair. And every time I talk to crypto anarchists, they talk about how, the ANCAP, the voluntarists, were innately peaceful people, and that there won't be angry roving mobs without the government, right? I think that's something that every voluntarist would say, no, we are not just going to get taken over by warlords.
Mm-hmm.
However, when we look at what crypto Twitter turned into over the last 10 days, 14 days, it turned into a gang of roving mobs trying to kick Craig out of the tribe because they don't like the fact that, first of all, he claims to be Satoshi Nakamoto, and secondarily, that he's a big blocker maximalist who very much wants to orphan all chains that aren't Bitcoin SV. So I understand that's, that he's a threat, but he's a business threat. And that's the point, is that he's a competitor. He's a capitalist. And if we're all voluntarists, we should look at that and say, okay, we need to outcompete with this guy. But if we then collude to attack him politically or to censor his business as a collective, then we're sort of de facto creating a state, or a state of affairs, at least anyways. So I would argue that that's anarchists exercising sovereignty and creating a de facto government in that situation. And therefore, why wouldn't Craig look to sue at the very least? Like, he wasn't even looking for damages. He's looking for an apology and for a cease and desist of like the collusive group criticism.
So there's a couple things to unpack there first. So you got these roving mobs of people, and when I think of roving mobs, I'm reminded of one of my favorite movies, Mad Max Fury Road, where you're just driving along, throwing stuff, blowing people up, playing flaming guitar on the way, like just the whole 9 yards.
As you do.
Now, roving mobs, like subjecting to a barrage of tweets, seems much more toothless. And here's the thing. So we're talking about people saying mean things about this person, to which he has responded with, I'm going to initiate armed men with guns to go take your stuff or make you shut up. I mean, that seems like a little bit disproportional. And I think it's that disproportional, bringing violence into the equation, where before it was just mean words, which, by the way, I'm not defending mean, and I'm just representing the argument more than anything. But also, even on personal level, I would never defend mean, terrible sayings, even though it's could be harmless. I just don't do that way. But we're still talking about anonymous people tweeting at him and just saying, "Oh, we don't like you," blah blah blah, versus he's actually going after them and not just angrily tweeting back.
Sure. I think you got to put yourself in his shoes, though. I mean, he's invested potentially billions of dollars. He's invested his entire life's work. His life's career is in this space. And now the overarching crypto economy has decided that he's persona non grata, and they want to force him out of his industry. It's basically picture a group of folks within the Dash DAO that want to get rid of Joel Valenzuela because they don't want you speaking for Dash anymore. Like, that would be devastating.
Believe me, that's what the end of every month looks like sometimes.
Well, and so then you understand the pressure. But what if it was completely unmerited, or you didn't have any recourse? I mean, to be kicked out of that would be a devastating event, and you have the right to defend yourself with the tools you have available. Like,
yes, I suppose the difference in that case is, even if people said mean things that resulted in supporters and investors not deciding to pursue to continue to fund me, and I mean, I don't imagine any kind of a world where I try to go dox and then sue some of these people saying the mean things. But I mean, that's a back and forth we could go on for like hours and hours. Last really quick thing, we're talking about roving mobs. You mentioned cartels. So some people would say, right, playing, what do they call it, delist SV advocate here.
Yeah.
Which, I don't. Did I unwittingly compare them to devils? I don't know. I didn't mean to. Whatever. By playing that game, you say cartels. Now, hold on a second. These are a bunch of volunteer businesses that have chosen voluntarily to take actions which will impact said business. Mm-hmm. And if they make the wrong decision, they get screwed. Their business falls apart. If they make the right decision, they benefit from it. So isn't it just people deciding which coins they want to list? Isn't it just their business only? They decide who they want to list and who they don't, for whatever reasons out there. And if you don't like it, just make your own exchanges, and there's going to be the exchanges that have Bitcoin SV, if it becomes wildly popular, will be the best exchanges and make the most money.
Sure. I think the answer is twofold. On the one hand, yes, I think when we've seen that, actually, we saw Float SV launched this week to sort of benefit from the furor that's going on over it, and say, hey, you know what, we'll be a BSV exclusive fiat exchange and only pairs related to BSV, and that's cool. So we've seen that. Yes, that is one of the major responses. I think the problem is that these exchanges have made themselves privy to securities law by treating cryptocurrencies as primarily trading assets. And I think overarchingly, it's the store of value narrative of BTC that has turned it from, I'm not trading monies for monies, I'm trading this like commodity property asset that is BTC, and that puts you under the purview of the SEC. And we can argue that that's not good, and I would actually argue that that's not good. But if you're going to do business in that space, it's the same thing. I can't get into like being a car dealer and just sell vehicles that don't have seatbelts. Like that will get me into trouble.
So basically, to summarize that point, these exchanges are operating in a legal framework, in a legal world with regulations, and they're possibly doing wildly illegal things while trying to be legal. And so someone can't just come and compete because they have to go through all the same legal paperwork, and they could get busted for stuff like that. So it's not exactly a free market space.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it frankly isn't a totally free market space. There is a government, and if you're going to do business as a legal entity, then you're privy to that. And I mean, Binance was kicked out of Hong Kong, and they were kicked out of Japan because they couldn't comply with securities laws of those places. So that's, it's clearly something that exists. And the reason for it is that Binance is under investigation for receiving bribes to list shit coins. And there's all this evidence of them, this fake volume and wash trading and all these different things that are just bad news. And now, like, to delist something that is not under their terms of service for whether they list or delist something in the first place, turns it into a personal decision, and it turns it into arguably market manipulation. I'm not saying CZ is definitely going to end up in prison or get some $50 million fine.
Just looks kind of sketchy, hence cartel.
He's put himself in the position to be investigated for it, and that's bad too. So it's just unfortunate. The whole thing is, and I think it's funny because Craig's accusation was that there was widespread collusion to cause him financial harm, and then the response was public
widespread collusion to cause him financial harm without even an attempt to hide that. And
exactly.
as I mentioned before, there have been a couple of coins that have exchanges that delisted that cited things like low hash rate, lower security, and some of them, I believe I saw something in there of almost no trading volume. Like those. I mean, the provability, whether you can argue those points is a different story.
Right.
Those are actually legitimate reasons. But it's been interesting to see that a lot of these have just been, we don't like that guy in doing business. Right. So this is his coin, and we're going to do it because we're taking a stand against his actions.
Right.
And and in a single sentence, do you think that that's a good precedent?
No, it's a terrible precedent. And especially for coins like Bitcoin Cash or Dash, both coins have been called scam coins widely in the past for various things that I think are genuinely unfair. But that puts, that precedent being set puts every quote unquote scam coin on the chopping block. And who's got the biggest hammer? It's the BTC community. And if we give them the authority of that precedent, they will absolutely drop the hammer on every project they can. So I think BCH would be the next one on the chopping block, would be my guess. But I don't think Dash is too far down that list either.
Ooh, that's pretty grim. Well, thanks for sparing a couple moments for your perspective. It's been very enlightening.
It's my pleasure, Joel. Thanks for having me.